Good morning, afternoon, or night, depending on when you're listening to. Welcome to episode one of the Solutions Podcast. I am your host, Ramsey, and now let's get this party started. First and foremost, I do want to start with saying thank you for tuning in. I might or might not be the most interesting person in the world, but I might be the most helpful to some, maybe to all. I don't know. So I want to start with a little bit of a background on myself. So what most would assume would be my biggest accolades is that I've been in the military for the past 15 years, and the majority of that time has been as a combat engineer. So a combat engineer, a lot of people outside of the army don't really know what that is, right? So how I like to put it is our motto is essayons. So when the infantry fails, we say let us try. And most of the time we do succeed. That's what a combat engineer is. A combat engineer is somebody that is willing to find any way to accomplish the mission. That's how I see it. A lot of engineers have a lot of pride in what they do, and they should. Everybody should have pride in what everybody should have pride in whatever it is that they're doing. If you're not taking pride in what you're doing, maybe we need to switch to do something else, right? But for me, I spend the majority of my time as a combat engineer, and I have found a lot of success in it, but I also have strayed away from my military occupation to do all kinds of other things, right? But let's stick with one, right? So as a combat engineer, I have done a magnitude of things from the yoga school, from the urban breach course, from sapper school, one of the most difficult schools out there in the United States military as a whole. And yeah, but I also have left my military occupation to do other things. Like I have also been an MP, a military police officer. I have also been a corrections officer. I have done everything from active duty to reserves, guard, full time with the National Guard, both in the state and at the federal level. Those are all things that we can talk about at later times. I have done everything from the lowest of lows to the highest of highs when it comes to the military. I actually started my full time with the California National Guard in El Centro, California. If you all don't know, that is a little border town that borders Mexicali, Baja California. Represent, first of all, Viva Chicali. And have made it all the way up to work at Washington, D.C., which those are things that people never even saw me accomplishing. I did not even see me accomplishing. And I've learned so much at every level, from down in El Centro all the way up to Washington, D.C., and every single thing in between. That is a little bit of a background on myself. Now let's move over to why am I here and why am I doing this and why are we doing this podcast? Why are you even listening? Why should you listen? So the reason I decided to start a podcast is because I've linked up with old friends from the past, and even some current friends, even some co-workers and everything. And every single time we have conversations, they seem to really be attached to some of the things that I say or how I say them, or it resonates in a more general level where they feel that what I say, a lot of people should get the opportunity to hear. I think I've been told, like, I don't know, I can't even count the amount of times that I've been told, hey, you should start a podcast, you should start something, because more people need to listen to the way you see things, and more people would benefit from learning from your leadership style, which I take a lot as a compliment. I am humbled by that, because I remember growing up, that was the furthest thing from me. I was quiet on my youth, right? During my youth, I was extremely quiet, and then as life circumstances started coming my way, I was forced to be a little bit of a hard-headed troublemaker, per se. And most people did not have the highest expectations of me. Not even close. They really did not think I was gonna make it that far. And those people are still in the same small town, and I made it up to, up to DC. So I feel that maybe that's a good accolade to have. But again, I don't hate on them or put them down at all, because maybe their life is there and it's good for them. So that's a reason why I begin into it, because one person, two people tell you, hey, you should do this. Okay, but when you're talking about, I don't know, 10 to 15 people say, hey man, like you should find a way to have long form content and put it out there so people can hear you, like, oh, okay, cool. So I finally got the courage to do it, because it's not easy. Everybody, I feel like I make it look easy whenever I do talk to people, or whenever I do brief in front of like 50 to 100 people or plus. I feel a lot of people see it like, oh man, he does it so natural, it's got to be easy. It is not easy. It is not easy, but I love it. I love seeing the faces when people just light up with that light bulb, and they're like, oh man, we can see things differently. We can operate differently. So that's why I really got into and wanted to start a long form content on top of the little videos, right? We had to put it on all the social medias in order to get the little clicks and to get the traction. But that's a little bit of why I got into it. So I do want to stress some information out, right? So I did go into the background of the military. That is where I got the majority of my professional experience, but that's not where I got my life experience, right? Because since the beginning of when I joined, I never felt like I was part of that brotherhood of the military or any of that. Enjoyed it. I enjoy seeing other people be part of that, but that just wasn't me. So I have always ventured into outside experiences. I've done martial arts my whole life. I've had karate schools open. I've had them close. I've had them be successful. I've not really had them failed yet, thankfully, right? I've done from that to being a barber, to recorded music when I was younger, to got into IT. I've been dabbling into computer and artificial intelligence and looking into the cloud, to Python, to all that stuff. So I've got a little bit of experience of everything, but the thing that has always stuck out the most is people. People are very similar in ways that they're not even aware of. A lot of people could resonate from each other. They just don't know because they don't speak to each other. I, on the other hand, I've always taken pride in talking to everybody, from the richest man in the room to the janitor, everybody. I've always taken pride in talking to everybody and treating everybody like they're somebody, because one day they could be. Too many times we are so focused on the person above us, the person that's rating us, the person that's paying us and everything, but we forget to treat everybody else, whether they're our peers or everything below, just like a human being. We tend to just forget, and it's natural. It's not a shot on you. It's not a shot on anybody. It's just a natural thing, right? Because we're trying to advance in this thing we call life. But me, on the other hand, I've always taken pride in treating everybody like they're somebody. Not ever treat anybody like they're anybody. Like, you gotta treat everybody like they're somebody. I have pride myself on that. I tell people all the time, and they're like, "Why? Like, why are you even worried about that stuff?" I said, "Hey, listen, man. Like, you don't know what somebody's going through until you let them open up. You don't know why they're there, and you don't know what they have done prior to getting to that position. Not every position is good in life. Not everybody has this trajectory that's going up, 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 and they never go down. A lot of people, I would say most people, will go down eventually. And then it's not about you getting down, it's about how you get back up. And some people just don't have that support, don't have that person in their ear or anything to help them get back up, or they just feel that they lost and that's it. They ain't getting back. They're not getting it back. I'm not that guy. I am not that guy. I have won and I have lost, but I'm here. And I continue to do my best to climb myself up from negative situations, right? And I try to empower everybody to do the same or similar to it. But while we're on that subject, let's talk about losses. I'm not a person that sees a loss, right? I either win or I learn, you know. Some call it losses, I call it lessons. And that's the way that we should try to shift our mind to adopt that mentality. You know what I mean? You could have that victim mentality or that victor mentality. I choose victor every single time. Every single time. Every single experience is an experience to learn. I have never wasted my time doing anything that I'm not picking up lessons from. All the way to watching Disney movie with the kids. There's lessons in there. There's experiences in there. There's messages in there, and I don't want to get into the political part of that. But there is so much to learn from everyday situations and simple things that you do, like watching a movie. If you like martial arts, watching the UFC and boxing, you can just watch and learn and see what somebody did good. You know, all the way from just talking to your neighbor. And I don't mean your neighbor that lives next door. I mean talking to a person that's next to you, talking to a coworker, talking to a teacher, talking to anybody that might have some experience. There is so much that can be picked up from every single aspect in life. So much. So yeah, that's a little bit about who I am, why I'm doing what I'm doing, in a way that I see life. Again, I love to learn. A old martial arts instructor once told me to always maintain a white belt mentality. A white belt, for those people that might not know, is the first belt that you get in almost any martial arts. That white belt doesn't know much, but is always seeking more information, is always wanting to learn, right? Because when you start something, you got that motivation to just go after it and to learn, and you want to learn and you want to do it over and over and over and over. But after time, you start seeing those blue belts, those purple belts, that they feel that, oh, they got it, they've been doing it for a while, and they just kind of stagnate themselves, right? And then once you're a black belt, you focus more on teaching. Sometimes you forget about learning yourself. But me, on the other hand, it doesn't matter if I got a black belt in 8 martial arts. It doesn't matter if I got a black belt in the military. It doesn't matter if I got a black belt in college. It doesn't matter if I got a black belt in life. I keep the white belt mentality, continuing to seek new information and more information. So with that being said, that's going to lead me into the topic for today's episode. Again, this is episode 1. It's just a brief introduction on me, but I do want to get into a book that I was given when I was a young sergeant. So when I was a young sergeant, I was serving in Afghanistan. We ran into a couple of, let's just call them negative, impactful events, right? So after a while, since we were seeing so much stuff, they kind of forced us to go see a chaplain or a resilience person, right? It's someone to help you decompress. It's kind of like, I don't want to say the word safe space, but that's what it was, right? This, even though everything was not that best around, in this program's tent, they had video games, they had board games, they had, I don't know, they had books, right? They had AC, which was pretty nice, right? They had all kinds of things that would help you to just decompress, to take you a little bit away from your typical environment, right? So after so many times of seeing things, they just said, hey, you guys got to go check on it. And I was a little hard-headed kid back then. Well, I think I was like 21, 22. I was a young Yeah, I was young, maybe 23. I don't remember. I was a young sergeant, and the reason why is because by that time, as this specifically, I was already on my fourth deployment. So in the army, we do year long tours. What we used to, now it's like down to 9 months, but it was very intense. And they made the decision that, hey, we need to stop by and we got to go see them. So when I did see them, I was very reserved. I was like, hey, I'm not interested in having any conversations or anything. Like, to me, this is stupid. This is the dumbest. Like, it's like, man, we need to go out there, we need to fight, we need to continue fighting. I thanked that guy. I can't remember his name, and I think he was actually an Air Force guy that they had leading that little program, right? And the reason why I say it like that is because the Air Force tends to be a lot nicer than the Army people. So I think it was a good combination. Whoever had the idea of bringing that individual there must have been a phenomenal leader, because the fact that they can recognize that and separate us from our typical environment, and in such an environment, that's an amazing tasking on its own. But back to the story. So I was a very hard-headed person at that time. So I was like, hey, I'm not trying to do any of this. Just let me know what I got to do to check the box and I can get out of here, right? And for you guys that have served in combat, and for those that have served in difficult positions like police officers and all that stuff, like, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They make you check that resilience box and that behavioral health box so you can continue going on, right? So I not say that I'm proud, not to say that I'm not, but I know the answers to give to check that box and get out of here, right? I know exactly what to say. I was trained very young, and I'm not gonna discredit that type of training. I believe that it has some good. So during that time, I knew exactly what to say, and that individual recognized it. He kind of ran out of how to work with me because I said everything the right way, right? Which is something I get a lot of credit for lately whenever I do any sort of speaking, or whenever I get put in a difficult situation, or whenever I get asked a question, like a gotcha question, and I sit back and turn it right back on them. But that's another conversation for another episode. Right now, let's get back to this. He was just like, you know what, man? Like, I can see you don't want to be here, but you seem like you're a very squared away individual, and your soldiers talk very good about you. But I do want to give you a gift. I want to give you this book. This book is called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Okay? And so just read it when you have time. I'm not going to quiz you on it. There's nothing to it except for your own self-development. It's like, he asked me, have you ever read a self-development book? And at that point, I was like, nah, man. Like, I developed myself, right? Very cocky individual I was. You know what I mean? I still have it. I still have it because you got to trust yourself. You got to get to a position where you have to trust yourself. You have to trust what you bring to the table and your experiences, right? You can always learn. So he mentioned, like, hey, listen, I'm just gonna give you this book. Try it out. It's not that long. It's only 7 habits that you gotta read into. And when you're done with the book, if you happen to finish it before the deployment's over, come over and let's talk about it. I was like, fine. I read the back cover where it gives you a brief description of what it is and everything. I'm like, okay, it doesn't seem bad, and I didn't have nothing else to do when we were on our downtime, so like, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I want to talk a little bit about it in the ways that I have applied the 7 habits of highly effective people. With the first one is called being proactive. It says, take initiative and responsibility for your life instead of blaming others. That is extremely important. The great man David Goggins says that he has an accountability mirror. And I don't know if it's figuratively or physically. To me, it sounded like he had it physically at one point, which is a mirror with the words accountability on top of it. And he writes all the things that he knows that he's responsible for. And so many times we are so quick to pass blame on somebody else, on something else. Simple example, right? If you get your butt chewed out because you got to work late, right? But you failed to be proactive, whose fault is it? You go to work and you failed to be proactive. You failed to plan the day before, So you leave right at the mark of when you feel you need to leave. Then you get all the red lights. Somebody cuts you off. You realize mid-trip you forgot something. So then you gotta go back to get it. Get back, you show up to work late, and they're looking at you like, bro, why are you late? And you're already angry at that person for calling you out, but you're failing to accept responsibility for the things that you did wrong, which is you failed to be proactive. So off the back, we're quick to blame the red lights, the guy that cut you off, you know, the fact that maybe your spouse or your kids or somebody moved something at your house that you forgot to grab what you needed to grab. We're so quick to blame that instead of saying, hey, I failed to plan, you know? And when you fail to plan, you plan to fail. You can quote that, right? When you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So one tip that I have for that is to do a GSD list. Everybody's like, what is that? It's a get shit done list. So I like to write down everything that I'm going to do the next day to make sure that it does happen. And I write it in chronological order. All the way from I'm going to wake up, wash my face, brush my teeth, drink my pre-workout, and go hit the gym. So monotonous. All the way to get up and I'm going to make my bed and do whatever I have to do. I write it down step by step every single day of the things that I want to accomplish the next day to make sure that they get done. And I have that on my notes on my phone every single day, and I'm looking at it. Okay, and then the second that I get some breathing time, I was like, what I got to do next? Just to make sure, right? And you look at it like, cool, I can start this early now that I accomplished whatever I had on my list prior to, sooner than I expected, right? So that's how I operate. So that GSD list will help you get yourself organized so you can be a little bit more proactive. Because even then, you're doing this the night before, so you're already being proactive on the next day. That's where we can benefit, right? I don't want to say people, right? Now, some people do this, and there's a lot of people that say the same thing, but that helps so much that you're not even aware of, because there's so much things to consume our brains with nowadays. There is all the social medias, and those social medias are trained to catch your attention. They're trained to be addictive. I'm not against social media. Clearly, I'm on it. That GSD alone will help you be proactive and get the stuff you need to get done. So I have one GSD for my daily tasks, and then I have one for work. So as soon as I show up to work, I know exactly what I want to get working on. Boom, 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 boom. If something gets in between, I prioritize. Is this more important than that? And then I get it done, and I everything down. So like that, I don't actually have to work outside of my typical business hours, for lack of better terms, right? And again, I'm still in the military, so we're 24/7. But I make sure that I get so much done in my 8-hour window that I never get questioned of what I'm doing in my off time. Habit number 2 is begin with the end in mind. And oof, that one, I feel it. So many times I tell people, what is your end state? As they begin talking, I always ask, what is your end state? What are you trying to get out of this conversation? What are you trying to get out of this task? Out of this event? I always ask people, that's one of the first questions I ask when I see somebody going down a rabbit hole, is what is your end state? What are you trying to do? Similar to what I mentioned in the beginning of the beginning of my podcast, the introduction, is what I'm trying to do is get the word out there that people feel they should receive. Again, I was told multiple times by multiple people, you should have some way of talking to people, because it does resonate a lot with a lot of individuals. So my end state, and that's why I brought it up from the beginning. Hey, this is what I want to do. I want to create a platform where people can listen and get the same content that I tell people almost every single day. I find myself repeating the same messages to everybody, and I was like, oh, now I have an ability. It's 2023. I have the ability to now put it in one content and push it out to everybody. And most people can listen to it, and more people can get that information, and maybe we can create a better society, right? The people that hold that information in and never want to hold it out I feel like those are insecure people. Like, we have to be willing to make everybody around us a better person. We should be so confident in our abilities that we're not afraid to raise others. So with the end state is try to figure out what is the actual outcome that you're trying to achieve. And once you get there, start the backwards plan. An example is if you're trying to get a promotion, okay? What are the steps I need to take to get that promotion? What can I do today to get me there tomorrow? Or by tomorrow, I mean the next day, the next year, so on and so forth. It's like, hey, what do I got to do to get there? But it's not about just that. It's like the why, right? When you start thinking about an end state, not only do you want to have your goal, you got to know within yourself, why do you want that goal to happen? Why do you want that goal to happen? Purpose is a very important thing. If you don't have purpose to what you're doing, you will lose that motivation real quick. Real quick, you will just stop achieving or going towards that goal that you're trying to achieve. Just like that. Just like that. Moving on to habit number 3 is put first things first. Prioritize and spend time on what's most important. Similar to what I talked about earlier about the get shit done list, right? There's things that are going to get in the way of you doing it in the chronological order that you wanted to do it in. You know what I mean? So you prioritize. What is more important? What is going to get me closer to that end state? If it's not in line with that, skip it over. Doesn't mean don't get it done. If it's something that you have to get done, get it done. But if it's taken away from your goals, move it to the side. Move it to the side. And this might be a little bit controversial to say, but that also might mean relationships and having a family and kids and stuff. If you're working towards a specific goal, it's not related to having a family or to having a spouse or having something like that. Like, don't even mess with it right now. Get to where you want to get to in life, and then build your family and your spouse and whatever it is you want to do at home. But sometimes you got to make tough decisions in order to prioritize what your end state is. And it's not easy, but it's necessary. Oh, habit number 4. That one gets me right in the feels, right? It says, think win-win. Seek mutual beneficial solutions in relationships. This might sound a little offensive to some, but I don't hang around with losers. I do not hang around with losers. I do not hang around with whiners and complainers and people that have that victim mentality. As I say, victor or victim mentality. That choice is yours. And that's not to contradict what I said earlier when it comes to me lifting everybody up. I will lift everybody up that I can. But when it comes to my circle, you better be doing something to be worth the attention that I don't have to give it to you. So most of my friendships are business related, empowerment related, or some sort of beneficial relationships to me and to them. I know the value that I bring to the world and I bring to people. The people around need to do the same. So that's how we continue to build each other up. The last thing you want is to keep that person that is an anchor and just keeps holding you back when you're trying to move forward. Whether that be an old friend that has just old toxic mindset, or it could be even a partner. You could have chose the wrong partner. And I'm gonna make a whole nother video when it comes to choosing a partner and the right one, and how the partner that you pick is probably the best investment or the worst crippling debt you will ever have in your life. We're gonna get into another episode on that one, but for now, let's talk about this one, right? Your relationships and your friendships need to be beneficial for your end state, or they just need to be beneficial for you all around. They gotta bring something to your life, and you gotta bring something to theirs too. Don't just be a win-lose situation. No, win-win. Help them, help you, help us. So habit number 4 is synergize. Value the differences and collaborate to solve problems creatively. We are in an interpersonal type of world. You need to have interpersonal relationships. You need to have the ability to communicate with others, and they have to have the ability to communicate with you in order to solve problems. There's a lot of problems that, yes, you could do on your own. Me personally, you see this? I'm a lone wolf. I do it. I am not the best team player. I'm not going to lie to myself. I am not the best team player. I do understand the importance of learning from every single person that's around me. And I do understand that one way is not the way. It's just a way. As a group, you can develop a creative plan to get to your solution faster, or better, or more efficiently, or cheaper. I can relate it to the military, but in other ways, right? There's so many times that we have been in a situation where we just can't figure it out. But we don't want to ask for help. We just don't. Pride, whatever it is, we just don't want to ask for help. But instead of taking it as asking for help, you can take it as in asking for a collaboration. You know what I mean? You just gotta tweak some of the ideas that you have in your own head, some of the things that we have been conditioned to from youth, to be able to see, hey, you know what, maybe I can benefit from this person. The wise man J. Cole once said, wise words from an indecent man, meaning you can learn something from anybody. You don't have to like them. Doesn't mean that they don't have a good idea. You don't have to like them. Does not mean that they do not have a good idea, or that they do not know how to operate where you're trying to operate. That just means that they might suck as a person, but as a worker, they might be what you need, or as experience. And last but certainly not least is to sharpen the saw. Renew yourself regularly through exercise, relaxation, learning, and planning. This is what I'm all about, right? You gotta get to a point where you just don't see yourself as perfect. That's it. Because success is limitless. Let me tell you that success is limitless. There is no cap to that. So you always want to reevaluate yourself, really reevaluate who you are and how can you improve. There's always a place and somewhere where you can improve. So many options. So many options. If you feel that you're the smartest person in the world, how about you improving your body? If you're the buffest person in the room, how about you improving your mind? That's just very basic things. A thing that I always used to get credit for is because I was a super duper hero of heroes. When it came to tactics and operations, I was able to do it phenomenally. But then when it came to switching over to the full-time side of the house with the Army National Guard, all of a sudden I had to look at a computer, something that I never touched. And I remember a good friend of mine, Henry Valenzuela, he looked at me once and he just stopped by and said, hey, you could tell that this is not easy for you, yet you're doing it very proficiently. And I never thought about it. How I just seen things was like, hey, I am what I am and I got to do the best for everybody, right? We're expected to be the best. So that's what I wanted to be. But I never even thought about it like that, because he just looked at me and was like, hey man, like I could see that this is not your strength, but you're still stronger than the most. And I was like, damn. So that guy is a great friend of mine. I feel he's a friend of mine and a good mentor, and hopefully I'll be able to get him on a podcast soon so we can have an open discussion about how he sees the world. But yeah, and for me to say that, it is not easy, right? Because I don't look up to many people. I don't work with many people. I said I'm most of the time I work for me and I learn for me and I work for my experience. And most of the time people are coming to me to seek guidance and to seek help and to seek leadership. But yeah, I do remember when he told me that, and that stuck to me. Because he worked with me a little bit. He's seen a little bit of what I can do when it comes to that, when it came to tactics. And so he's like, hey man, yeah, you got it, man. You're good. You go. He was actually teaching a class, and he's like, oh man, like this guy's good. Hey, you see what, what's his name is doing, and he kind of had pretty much used me as an example for the others to follow, right? So in that I was shining. But when it came to a computer, when I actually got hired, I barely knew Control Alt Delete. I barely knew it, but I knew that I had to. Once I figured out what the job consisted of, I knew that I had to learn. So what did I do? I spent extra time. So when my coworkers and my supervisors were taking a break, I was just researching and learning how to use it. So yes, I was at a disadvantage and now I'm advantageous. And that's what a lot of people need to think about. Only because you're down here does not mean you can't get up here when your peers are here, right? We just gotta work a little harder. You work a little harder and then you'll surpass them, and then you can keep your pace. Just make sure your pace is above the rest. So I don't want to keep you guys any longer. I do appreciate you guys for taking the time. If you did stay through the whole episode, hey, thank you, man. Thank you. And I hope that we continue this process going. Again, this is just episode 1. Wanted to go a little bit over about who I am, why I'm doing this, and a good lesson that I learned from a individual that had no business looking out for me. He just did. He just said, hey, here's a book. And I took that book and ran with it. All right. Well, that's done for episode 1. Thank you for tuning in to the Solutions Podcast, and stay blessed.